very immediate future, and it is not something like in science fiction that happens 500 years later. But within 50 years, there will be a kind of a race into going to the like other planets, like any kind of surfaces, planetary surfaces, including lunar surface, asteroidal surfaces, Mars. All these are the place where the humans are starting going to be inhabited. He was declared as a president-elect, and within 9 days he will become the president of India. So that time everybody was, even people in ISRO who were earlier his colleagues, they were also very much frightened to meeting. But I was because I was very much fascinated with the project I had done. I want to show it to him, and he was very much he was just like an ordinary person. He was very much appreciated and spoke a lot of things, lot of good things. Just 5 minutes, I was able to speak to him.
Hello, folks. Welcome to another super special episode of the iRonik show with a super special guest. Mr. Jijith Nadumuri Ravi is an ex-ISRO scientist who was part of the Chandrayaan 1 mission. We are all rooting for Chandrayaan 3 to have a successful soft landing on the lunar surface. This podcast is all about the Chandrayaan 3 mission, how the mission has been planned, how ISRO is executing such a critical mission at one third of the cost compared to other countries. Jijith Sir walks us through the entire technical facet of the Chandrayaan 3 mission. How and what is the importance of such a mission? This is the first of the two-part podcast that we have recorded with Jijith Sir. Before we let you soar high with the Chandrayaan 3, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe, and do follow us on Spotify. Enjoy. Mr. Jijith Nadumuri Ravi, a very warm welcome to you on the iRonik show. And
Thank you.
sir, I think this is such a topic, and everyone is talking about Chandrayaan 3, ISRO, and everything. So we have got a lot of requests to have someone from ISRO to do a podcast on Chandrayaan 3 because the audience today, they want to know more about what's happening, right? Because everyone was really pumped up on the day, I think it was 14th of July when Chandrayaan 3 was launched. And everyone is really pumped up about what is going to happen, how would the landing be. So coming so you were with ISRO for about 5-6 years, I
Yes,
think
yes.
around. So you're part of the Chandrayaan 1 team,
Yeah, I was part of the Chandrayaan orbital design.
right?
That is how the orbit moves from terrestrial, like earthbound orbit, to the lunar orbit. That one. That is the kind of
Okay.
contribution I've given. Yeah.
Okay. So before we get into that, I just wanted to know what does ISRO actually does, and what is a life of a scientist in ISRO, and what you guys exactly do out there. First, if you talk about ISRO, what exactly ISRO does, what is the plethora or the spectrum of research that ISRO involves itself into?
Yeah, that's a good question. So uh, overall, the ISRO is a large organization. So when I was there, it was around 15,000 to 17,000 people. So spread across some major divisions. So one is the launch vehicle team. So that is everything related to the launch vehicle. So we know about the PSLV, GSLV, and now we have the LMV3, the Mark 3. We used to call it GSLV Mark 3 at that time.
Mhm.
So the launch vehicle is one part, and the second part is the satellite. That is like a payload to the launch vehicle, because the launch vehicle lifts up the satellites and takes it away from the gravity well of Earth. And the third important factor is the applications that are built on the satellite. So just like a satellite is a launch kind of a payload for the launch vehicle, all these
Right.
applications, that is the lot of hardware related to the sensors for atmospheric or spatial study, like outer space study,
Mhm.
like study of the radiation, electromagnetic radiations. So that is the application part, which is the third one. So the entire ISRO is centered around three of these like entities: launch vehicle, satellites, satellite applications. So that is how it is distributed. And of course you have special missions, like all the planetary missions are very special. So that is treated slightly as a variant of these general threefold divisions. So you have as instead of a satellite, like typical satellite that orbit around Earth, you have a spacecraft or space probe, which goes to a planet or a moon and land there, like Chandrayaan 1, 2, 3 or Mangalyaan. So all these are planetary missions. So there, instead of the terminology, the satellite, we use the terminology of a
Hmm.
spacecraft, and it goes to the other moon or other planet, like that. So
So
this entire workforce of ISRO is distributed into all these activities. Yeah.
okay, okay. So I would definitely think that there would be a lot of secret missions. I mean, like NASA does or anyone does. ISRO would be also, involved in a lot of secret missions. I don't know if you are allowed to speak about that. I think that is not public knowledge. But does it? There are secret missions.
As you rightly pointed out, I will not be able to dwelge on any kind of
Yeah, yeah,
confidential
sure.
mission. But having said that, definitely, like we have a lot of collaborative activities with the RDO, and it is the same for not only for India but even for any other country like United States, Russia, or everywhere, because there is a kind of common elements in terms of launch vehicle or a missile, etc.
Now talking about the life of a scientist in ISRO. So if you have to break down the work activity of a scientist in ISRO, so how does a day in the life of a scientist in ISRO look like? How it starts, how it ends,
Yeah, yes.
or is there an end?
So there is a kind of a very different kind of environment. Like you have a ISRO is basically a government organization, but nobody believes
Right.
that it is. So ISRO, it's a very kind of a professional organization and not very different from any. I would say a little more closer to the IT organizations,
Okay.
where people work with enthusiasm, most of a lot of enthusiasm, and there may be launch missions. You typically don't have any breaks, so it is like a 48-hour missions.
Oh.
So you start on a day, and then you will be continuing in the office. Maybe hardly some tea, coffee, some dinner typically arranged officially, and then you go. You sometimes you sleep there, and then you wake up next day, and then continue the activities. It's something like a 48-hour continuous activity being in the office. But most of the people love it to be part of the mission, and then they don't really care about any of this. That's the kind of like activities. And not only that mission day, which are very hectic, even the
Hmm.
activities start from 6 months onwards, like whatever we call countdown. For the cameras, it is starting from 48 hours or 16 hours, etc. But the actual countdown in the life of a scientist working on the launch missions, typically because of the program planning and strategical event schedules, etc., start for as early as 6 months, and then scheduled activities are continuing from 6 months onwards towards the launch. It's like a tapasya. It is a kind of people work together for
Right.
this kind of missions, like
Absolutely.
that.
Uh, so again, going back to ISRO. So if you have to explain ISRO's importance to someone who is wearing maybe a 20-year-old, right? Because there are a lot of young listeners of the podcast, and a lot of young people, the Gen Z and the millennials, they are consuming this podcast and they're gaining the information through these podcasts. So if you
Okay.
have to tell them about the importance of ISRO in terms of the geopolitical scenario,
Yeah.
so what would be, why is ISRO so important for India as an organization? Why it is so important for India?
Yeah. Yes. So the I would like to tell the children and the youth who is watching this, so ISRO is a kind of a very special organization, which is focusing and giving investments in the future of the country. So because many
Okay.
people ask these questions like why launch these missions? Other countries like US have already landed on moon in
Hmm.
1969, and why we will have to waste our efforts for this kind of a mission? But the idea is like this is like asking like already US and Russia, everybody have national highways and all the infrastructure. They have malls. Why you have to have your own national highways and super highways and malls and railways and infrastructure? So this is a I'm comparing that because this is an infrastructure that we are building. Because today, we are all earthbound and we have things, all other things are related to the planet Earth, and but a very future and very immediate future, and it is not something like in science fiction that happens 500 years later, but within 50 years there will be a kind of a race into going to the like other planets, like any kind of surfaces, planetary surfaces, including lunar surface, asteroidal surfaces, Mars. All these are the place where the humans are starting going to be inhabited. So that is one
Right.
thing. So we are actually building the infrastructure. It's like a roadways, railways, etc. We are building the infrastructure to be having a presence in the, especially our nearby neighborhood, that is Moon, which is an important asset. And currently, the status of Moon is equivalent to Antarctica and the Arctic circles, where every country, it is a property of every country. So there is no country which is considering it as their own territory. So it's something like an open international territory, and it is
Hmm.
in the interest of India to be having a very good stronghold there. So with the Chandrayaan 3 mission itself, there are three assets that is getting built. Assets in the sense the capabilities. So we have the capability to orbit around Moon, capability to land on Moon, but that is soft landing on Moon. And also the third capability is the ability to drive a vehicle on the surface of Moon. So these are the immediate
Oh,
goals, immediate assets or capabilities that ISRO want to build. And this is the
okay.
one reason why we have the Chandrayaan. So other people have done it earlier, doesn't make any difference for us that we as a country have to do. And of course, India is not just one country, not anymore a kind of just one of the
Hmm.
countries in the world. It is a kind of one of the largest economies, or surpassing the United UK, and also projected to be number two and then become number one within this century. So then it becomes mandatory that India is ahead and on par with the other nations who have achieved some of these missions.
Absolutely. So now, since you spoke about the Chandrayaan mission, it started in 2008 with the Chandrayaan 1, right?
Yes, yes,
Of which you are also a part. Then to 2019, almost after 11 years, it was, I think, around September, October again, 2019, when Chandrayaan 2 was launched. And now in July 2023, we have the Chandrayaan 3. So,
yeah.
what is the basic difference between the three missions? I mean, 1, 2, and 3, Chandrayaan 1, 2, and 3. What would be the basic difference? Is there a technological advances, or was
Yeah.
there any goals that were also different in Chandrayaan 1, then Chandrayaan 2, and now with Chandrayaan 3? There are something, the goals that ISRO wants to achieve or India wants to achieve. Is there a difference?
Yes, yes, it's a very good, important question. So there are even straight away differences in the objectives. That is, the goals itself was different. In case of
Okay.
Chandrayaan 1, the mission objective was to just orbit around the moon. So the orbiting the moon was the primary mission. And as a bonus, we thought of having a hard landing, that is crash landing on the moon. And
Mhm.
both objectives, the primary objective and the auxiliary or the bonus objective, both are achieved in the Chandrayaan 1. We had a hard landing on the moon. The spacecraft which orbited has there is a it's hard landed, and we also have in an approximate way put a flag of national flag on the surface of moon, based
Right.
on the inputs of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. So this much positive. This look like it's a bonus. A lot of things are additionally achieved as a bonus in the Chandrayaan 1. And the Chandrayaan 2 mission, the objective was slightly different, and it is an improved objective of soft landing on the moon. So you have an orbiter. So there are two objectives: another orbiter around moon, and there is a lander that's supposed to land on moon, and a rover which was supposed to drive on the moon. So there is a threefold objective, on which objective one succeeded. So we have Chandrayaan 2 orbiter still orbiting the moon, and that is also going to support the Chandrayaan 3 as a for the orbital functions. Chandrayaan 3 will use Chandrayaan 2 orbiter, and the other two, because the soft landing didn't succeed because of there is a kind of calculation errors in defining the thrusters, the thruster velocities, etc. So it because of that, there was a kind of a spin vector, additional spin vector, which created a spin, unnecessary spin for the
Hmm.
spacecraft, and also the thruster, the upward thruster was little bit more than what is required. So it's like a overcompensated upward thrust, because of which the lander didn't land at the exact location, and crash landed in a little bit offset location. So that was the kind of mission for Chandrayaan 2. And Chandrayaan 3 is an exact replica mission of Chandrayaan 2 with all the
Okay.
three objectives again repurposed. So you have basically a kind of lander and a kind of a rover. Of course, there was an orbiter plan, but because the other previous orbiter is working perfectly fine, they have not. There was a very judicious choice of not having an orbiter. So we have the Chandrayaan 3. We have a kind of a lander and a rover. So once the spacecraft, that is current payload, that is a combined orbiter, combined lander and rover, that will go and orbit around moon, just like the orbiter, but it is not called as an orbiter because there is no third module which will continuously orbit on the around the moon. But the same module which continuously orbit and reduce the elliptical length of the orbit slowly becomes a 100 kilometer circular orbit around the moon. And from that state, it will start descending onto the lunar surface and it will land onto the lunar surface, a soft landing onto the lunar surface. And then after it is successfully landed, you have a rover which comes out of it and then start moving around the lunar surface, doing experiments, etc. And there is two additional modifications done into the Chandrayaan 3 compared to the Chandrayaan 1. One is the this landers legs. They are more powerful, that can withstand a velocity of 3 meters per second. Earlier
Okay.
Chandrayaan 2 lander, it was 2 meters per second. So this is like a little bit 50% increase of the capacity. So it
So
can
how does that
withstand.
affect?
Yeah, if
Sorry, I'm just
for example there is a tolerance level. Like when you say soft land, there may be a kind of a velocity tolerance of 2 meters per second or 3 meters per second. So it the if that strength is not there, slight increase in the landing velocity, then again that landing gear or the legs of the lander get
Okay.
damaged. So this is a more
Okay.
powerful leg. So it can land at a little more faster velocity compared to the Chandrayaan 2 lander. Another thing they have modified is in case of Chandrayaan 2, this landing target, the surface where it has to land it was around 500 meter into 500 meter, shorter, smaller area. So here it's around 4 kilometer into 2.5 kilometer. It's a larger area. So this is like
Yeah.
additional, no, additional redundancy and additional tolerance, so that it can little more. The whoever controlling the spacecraft can make it land little more easier because it's a larger surface area where the landing is attempted, and it can land little slightly faster, and then also it will not damage because it has a stronger landing gear, or the legs are much more stronger. So the success rate is higher for the Chandrayaan 3, and we are all hoping that it gets a grand success.
I think the whole of India has its finger crossed for the landing date. Uh, okay. So just going back to Chandrayaan 2 once again. So I think in 2019 the whole of India came together and cried for two reasons. First was obviously India Dhoni's run out in the World Cup, and then Shri K. Sivan crying on the shoulder of PM Modi. So these were the, I think, two incidents that brought whole of India together. Uh,
Yes.
so Chandrayaan 2. Now again, uh, if I have to say, would you agree that if the budget for the mission would have been higher, it would have been probably, whatever you achieved out of Chandrayaan 2, the landing was not perfect as we would have, hoped, the scientists ISRO would have hoped. If the budget would have been higher, will it have been possible to achieve it in the first trial itself?
I would say that the budgets given to ISRO or budget consumed by ISRO is compared to other space agencies very very small. Having said that, and definitely there it is an increase in the budget. Definitely helps the scientists who are working in for ISRO, and also like definitely like not only for the mission, for also for the
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever the support system for these engineers and scientists, like in terms of their living condition, everything. Definitely, the higher budget will help. but I don't see any direct impact of the budget to the this particular problem that I was talking about.
Okay.
We cannot correlate directly with the lack of budget, because for example, even with the more budget also, this kind of things can happen, because it's a kind of a
Yeah.
error in the software, and it's a first time landing. And if you compare with the number of failures that other countries have in terms of landing on the moon, this is like they, for example, US have done many trials and errors of 3 or 4 times, and then it landing. Even it was happened earlier, there were 3 4 trials failures, and then it landed. And many other countries, there are a lot of trials happened, and it's like multiples of budget, multiples of landing costs, mission costs, like multiple mission failure
Mm-hmm.
missions. So how many amount of money will be lost in the overall mission, including success and failure. So compared that, it is minuscule. The kind of failure that ISRO have happened as a single failure is a kind of not a kind of comparatively, it's not a big budgetary problem. But having said that, even otherwise, whether the mission is successful or failure, uh, ISRO will require. I mean, ISRO needs more budgets, and all the government should support ISRO with increased budget. That's what my view.
Coming back to any other, any other country who has, launches lunar mission, be it the Apollo 11 in 1969, they took almost 1/10 of the time what Chandrayaan 3 or Chandrayaan 2 requires to land on the moon, which is around roughly around 40 days, if I'm correct, if I'm not wrong, right? So the
Yeah.
reason I understand is that the rocket that we have to launch Chandrayaan 3 into the lunar orbit, the LVM3 or the Fat Boy that has been termed, is a pretty lighter rocket, and it cannot directly take the satellite into the lunar orbit. So it's kind of the slingshot that they have to take. I mean, they have to fire at each perigee point when it reaches that particular point, and it then takes it into the higher orbit. And similarly, using the Earth's gravity, it's just spinning around. And I think at one point it will give one more thrust, and it will get into the lunar orbit, but the lunar orbit will keep on then rotating it. So if you can please uh, let us know how that whole process works, how that, I mean, we have a very vague idea of it from the movie Mission Mangal, but if you can, from a scientific way and in a maybe a bit easier term, if you can help us understand how that whole process
Hmm.
works.
Yeah, I will, because this was the area in which I worked for Chandrayaan 1, that is orbital design.
Okay.
One more point I would say is, like many people tell this, that ISRO mission to moon, going in a very slow fashion, taking 40 to 42 days, and like maybe a US mission maybe reaching there in 11
Hmm.
days. So it's not a kind of whatever ISRO's 40 days, 42 days mission is not something which is not robust. I would say that is the first thing I want to say, because there is many people have that confusion.
Hmm.
Is that this is an whatever ISRO is doing is the kind of a minimum energy kind of an orbit. So, for example, traveling to from Earth to Moon is typically everybody layman assumption is that it's a straight line, but it is not. And if you want to
Right.
travel in a straight line, you need to have a super heavy, super powerful rocket, which no country, including US, doesn't have it. Where you are from point to point, like a railway, like a train or a plane or a bus travels. So that's not any of the spacecraft will be traveling. So I will just give a hypothetical scenario, like assuming that you want to travel from Earth to Moon in a straight line, or in a relative curvature with a single piece curvature, which is little bit better than a straight line. Then in that case, you need a very powerful rocket to come out of the Earth gravity, because Earth gravity is a gravity well. So you need a huge
Hmm.
amount of energy to go straight into aiming straight to the moon. And then once you reach moon, because you are in a super high velocity, you are traveling, you need a diesel equivalent kind of a deceleration, which
Yeah.
take equal amount, similar amount of energy to decelerate it. So you are wasting tons and tons of energy for both to accelerate from Earth and to decelerate when it is reaching moon. If you don't decelerate, you will be just crashing on like an asteroid onto the surface of moon. So going in a straight line is a total foolish thing. even if you have money to buy that much amount of fuel, and
Hmm.
you even if you have capacity to have it on the launch vehicle, nobody does that. It's a foolish thing to do. So, and maybe the only advantage will be maybe reaching moon in a single day, etc. But that's not serving any purpose. Now you come to the fact like how the US is doing, because they are going with, as you said, they are having a more powerful rocket. So that's because their space industry have been like kickstarted in 1969, or even more than
Right.
that in the 1960s, and they have developed a launch vehicle which are very powerful, and that is why they are able to reach up to Pluto and have an orbiter around Pluto and land on Pluto. All these things are possible because they have a long history of space exploration. So what have ISRO done at current stage is the best thing that ISRO, like in the current stage of the evolution of the development of ISRO, and with the efficient utilization of the budget, whatever ISRO achieved in the 40 days kind of mission is the best thing to do. Now, after now, and I am so it's a kind of a efficient utilization of the budget that ISRO has done, and the orbit is a result of that efficient budget utilization, efficient energy utilization, etc. Yeah.
Just adding to your point, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think when I mentioned that it took 1/10 US the fat, I mean the US Apollo took 1/10 of the time than Chandrayaan 2 or 3. What it will take. Having said
Yeah.
that, what ISRO is doing at the budget that it has been allotted, I mean, other countries are taking, I think, more than 20, 50 times of the budget, and also the fuel effectiveness. So the
Yes.
ISRO's mission is cost effective as well as fuel effective.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes, sir.
that
Please
is
continue.
the yeah, that is the kind of quality or the valuation that ISRO have in going to land there in a longer duration, like 42
Yeah.
days. Now, come to the technical details of how do you travel to moon. So that is basically the GTO to LTO or transit. That is the part of my project was part of that in ISRO, chartered in 2002 with appreciation from Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. So what is basically happening is you have for example, this as I mentioned, there are three parts: launch vehicle, spacecraft, and then with the payloads of the spacecraft, basically. So in case of a lunar mission, basically you have a launch vehicle, and it has got four stages, like the booster rocket stage, the strap-on rockets, the solid boosters, and the solid propellants, and then you have finally the cryo stage. So the cryo stage gives the largest velocity, and then it goes to the kind of a geosynchronous orbit around Earth.
Mhm.
And after cryo stage, the spacecraft module separate, and the spacecraft is released, and it's starting a orbit around Earth. So by that time, you don't have any, like, the role of the launch vehicle is completed. Now the spacecraft is
Okay.
orbiting around the Earth somewhere in a kind of 100 or 500 kilometer orbit. It is going, and then what they do is elevate this orbit, because this is how the energy efficiency. No, for the purpose of energy efficiency, they don't try to go to moon immediately. Step by step, at the apogee point, like you correctly mentioned, rockets are fired, and because of the rocket firing, it's this elliptical orbit, the circular orbit around Earth will elongate every rocket fire.
Hmm.
It have a get into a longer and longer orbit. So it's something like more elongated elliptical orbit, and like that it proceeds for a few days with the 3, 4, 5 steps, and then it reaches sufficient when it reaches the sufficient larger apogee point, then the gravitation of Earth is very weak at that point, because it's
Yeah.
a very elongated ellipse, and the spacecraft is at the apogee point of the ellipse, and the gravitation, it is almost away, means little bit higher in the gravity well of the Earth, which means it's a lesser gravity, and that time they'll another fire the liquid apogee motor, the thrusters, the big thruster of the spacecraft, and it gets into a get the escape velocity and gets into the orbit. It goes into it goes to like a sling. You rightly mentioned a sling slot. It is slinged into the like a location of moon. So this
Yeah.
entire calculation we are doing in kind of software simulations, etc. That is what I was part of for the Chandrayaan one. So you know exactly where the moon will be while when the spacecraft reach the point, that particular point on the lunar orbit. It's a predictive kind of a calculation. So both
Mm-hmm.
the when you do a sling from the highest apogee of on the earthbound orbit, uh, wherever the spacecraft reach exact at that same spot, the moon also will be reaching, because that is how the simulation, based on the simulation, that is how it is set. And for achieving that, you have a kind of a mathematics. So I was working along with the applied mathematical division, and it involves a lot of calculus of variation and the tensor calculus, which is basically a solution for the multi-body problem. So basically, for
Mm.
example, you have to calculate the gravity of Earth and Moon. So that is a two-body problem. But the environment around Moon, there are components of gravity from Sun, and even some larger planets like Jupiter and other. So typically, you need to solve for a multi-body problem where the largest component is the gravity of Earth. Then, of course, near to the near to the lunar surface, the largest component is the gravity of Moon, and you have gravity of Earth, and the third component is the gravity of Sun, and fourth component, interestingly, is the gravity of Jupiter, and then all
Okay.
the other planets also exert a component. So it is a kind of a heavily accurate kind of a calculation involving a large number of compute servers in a compute, like a lot of computers clustered together and then creating the computation. And as a result of it, you know the exact location where the moon will be, and that is exact location to where the spacecraft is heading to, and exactly when it
Okay.
you exactly at the point when you plan, they both come together, and then automatically the spacecraft will come under the gravity of moon and enter into a kind of elliptical orbit around moon. So in case of Earth, the elliptical orbit was the last stage. This for the moon, it is the first stage. Now, using the same principle, you have to do fire the rockets in the opposite direction, and the elliptical orbit slowly reduces into a circular orbit in 3, 4, 5 steps. And in the last stage, you will get a kind of an orbit, typically 100 kilometer into 100 kilometer, a very almost near perfect circular orbit around the moon. So, in case of Chandrayaan 3, there is another parameter which is the that it is objective is to land to the south pole. I mean, not exactly, but very closer to the southern south pole. So this is one of the spacecraft once it is landing on the surface of moon. This is will be the one of the first spacecraft to land very close to the south pole, maybe to the 60-degree south latitude of moon. So that is another achievement that ISRO want to make. So this orbit itself, compared to the previous Chandrayaan mission, one mission where I was part of, this mission is actually having a slightly angular tilt in its like lunar orbits, because it want to
Mm-hmm.
launch. I mean, it want to land on the like latitudes lesser than 60-degree, closer to the south pole of moon. So that's kind of overall how do you reach moon
Okay.
using this orbital dynamics.
So now, so I mean, we all obviously pray. We are obviously praying that Chandrayaan Mission 3 is a success. So once the mission is a success, once we have landed, the Chandrayaan 3 has landed on the moon. So given the all the information that would be collected, how would it? What exactly is the end purpose of it? Obviously, collecting the information and everything is a starting of something, right? So what is the end objective to it? Is it habitation in the moon, or what are we aiming for?
Oh, okay. So the kind of immediate objective of Chandrayaan 3 mission is actually revealed through the kind of scientific experiment modules that are part of the Chandrayaan 3. Like there is a module which focus on Earth. So basically, the objective is to understand Earth as a planet with life. So these
Hmm.
studies, like when you do it from moon, is equivalent of like searching for the signals of life from of another planet. So we use Earth itself as an example and study Earth from the moon. So by understanding the signals of Earth by from moon, you get some patterns which we can use it for finding out Earth-like planets around the universe. So the study of life signals on Earth from the moon surface. That's one. Then the study of the soil, lunar soil, little much more detail, because even with the crash landing we have done in Chandrayaan 1, we got some information like the presence of water on the moon. So this Chandrayaan 3 mission, it's going very closer to the pole, is also very much related to the deepening the study about the water on the moon. So by sampling the soils which are very closer to the south polar region, you get more understanding of the nature of water on the surface of moon. And typically, like if you understand the geology of moon, there are a lot of areas in the moon where there is no sunlight for lakhs and lakhs of years, because
Yeah.
very close to the south pole, lesser than south 60-degree latitude. There are small craters, small and large, for example. They are small craters where the sunlight is very minimal. So there will be like ice, like hardened solid ice there. If it's maybe there is also some of the ambitious kind of requirements, or like wishes, is that you may even pick up some ice directly, some ice there from the lunar surface, etc. So the study of ice is very important. For example, on the Earth you
Mm.
get gold, and a solid gold. When you like mine the Earth, you get solid. On the surface of moon, ice is equivalent to gold, because
Oh.
if you get a reservoir of ice, then that location becomes a place where you can create a launch pad, similar to the launch pad in Sriharikota. You can
Hmm.
actually create a launch pad on the surface of moon in such locations. So if you are able to detect, it's not just part of the Chandrayaan 3 mission, I'm saying in general. If you are able to detect certain areas on the surface of moon where there is abundance of ice, something like abundance of copper or iron on the in certain deposits on the surface of Earth. So if you have seen such abundance, you can immediately in the subsequent you can use that information to create a kind of a launch pad, because water is another one important component for creating a launch pad there, because you can split water and create hydrogen and oxygen, and these two are the two cryogenic gases that we need to have for creating a kind of a launch vehicle. So you can create a launch pad. I mean, it's not like 1 year or 2 year activity, but you can actually create taking some 50 years, you can create a launch pad there, and that will be the starting point of your planetary missions. Planetary missions, wherein
Okay.
because the means if you have a space launch pad on an Earth, the kind of cost and efforts and energy fuel required for launching from
Mm.
Earth is very high. Maybe even 1/6 of that is, or even lesser than that much, is only required on a launch pad on a surface of moon. So once you have a launch pad on the surface of moon, you are the pioneers in the space exploration, because from moon you can start launch vehicles and then go to any other like planets much more easier and much more cheaper way. And there are
Okay.
certain scientists who say colonization of the Mars will require the colonization of moon, because in order to colonize Mars, you need large number of spacecraft missions
Mm.
from Earth to Mars. Like continuously, you need to occupy the Mars. Continuously, people have to travel there, going back, coming back. A lot
Mm.
of ferry of food and fuel and other materials back and forth from Earth to Mars, and that kind of scenario, the moon will be the primary accelerator, where you have the launch pads for going to Mars. That is a kind of consensus across the world. All the scientific community has arrived. So that is what I also said. Like, this is an asset building activity for the future generations that we are doing right now.
Okay. So, sir, your thoughts on the landing of Chandrayaan 3?
I am just
How?
because we are actually crossing our fingers and looking at it. And at the moment, only one thing I can say is that the parameters are better compared to the Chandrayaan 2, because I mentioned about a larger area where you can land. So there is a flexibility is higher. The
Okay.
chances of failure is lesser. And so we are all hoping for that mission to succeed.
Okay. So this slingshot activity that you just explained to launch the Chandrayaan 3 into the lunar orbit, this is also
Mhm.
what we followed during the Mangalyaan mission, the
Yeah, yes,
Mars orbiter mission. So,
yes, yes.
can you please let us know how that whole mission turned out to be? What were the challenges in that Mars mission, and how the scientists overcome it, and we had a
Mhm.
first successful attempt, and we landed on the Mars. So,
Yeah, yeah,
how that happened? If you can,
that is like a very rarest of rare achievement in the entire space exploration history of all the world. That
yeah,
one country goes for the Mars for the first time and succeed, and for which I think it's highly remarkable achievement. The kind of the main thing that has happened positively is that, see, just like in the kind of a moon landing, the biggest devil
mm,
in the detail or the biggest fear is basically the last minute kind of problems that comes when you are landing on the surface of moon. Like I mentioned about the lander not able to withstand
mm,
the landing speed or offsetting the landing location or some kind of instability like Chandrayaan 2 has faced, like the overcompensated upper thrust, etc., and spin vectors, momentum vectors, etc. These are all very dangerous things for the Chandrayaan
mm,
missions. Whereas in case of Mangalyaan mission, the main problem is the computation accuracy. Like you are traveling a much more larger distance compared to moon. The Mars is much far and far away, and in case in comparative notions, it is like a in a football stadium you use a pen and put a dot in a football stadium, and you have to go and
right,
land on that dot. That is the kind of requirement when you have a Mangalyaan mission. And our scientists, the mathematical accuracy that they have used to understand the path correctly. The path, you get the path immediately. Like I said, the same methodology of lunar mission design. Similarly, there is a Mangalyaan mission design, etc., wherein using the tensor calculus and solving the multi-body problems, and you will get the trajectory of the spacecraft very clearly. But after that, the real mission, you will have a lot of variable parameters,
mm,
and it may deviate from that particular path. Not like our buses are deviating from the roads, but it's slight deviations. But this microscopic deviation itself will derail the that prediction of where the Mars will be when the spacecraft reaches there. So in order for the correcting that, you will have to fire the rockets. So basically, there are mission control from there. These remotely the rockets are fired, and there is a kind of delay in communication because even the light
mm,
travel it takes some time to reach from Mars to Earth. There is a kind of delay, so hours of delay is there. So if you are not very precise, and you have to be very precise to make these corrections. If there are no corrections, like if the spacecraft is moving exactly as planned in the mathematical model, then there is nothing. But anytime when there is a correction, then the people will fear like they have seen a ghost. Because
yeah,
when you make the correction, if there is an overshoot, everything goes for a toss. So that
mm-hmm,
way, they have been like it was like a tapasya, like for all the days in which the mission was active, they will be praying every day in the morning and evening, and thinking that okay, let me not fire the rockets for corrections. There should not be any. Just like we pray that okay, in our daily life, let us not encounter any danger. That is what they pray, and then they will like whenever there is a maneuver required, they will be little slight heavily frightened, and then they will do it, and then finally they reach that Mars, and then orbit. I mean, you can imagine the kind of pressure and tension, which
yeah,
is not a 1 day tension, 1 week tension, but tension continuing for months. But they
right.
achieved it. So that's the biggest kind of applause they
You
required for that.
you spoke a lot about, I mean, what are the challenges, or what are the reason for failures, I mean, when Chandrayaan 2 went, or any other rocket can any other satellite can face while trying for a to catch the orbit of the moon or the Mars for that matter. So what are those things? I mean, I would believe there are a lot of things in the space, I mean, asteroids and everything. So
Yeah.
how do we are those things taken into consideration while I think you are part of that same project itself. I mean, to figure out the orbit and the path, if I have to put it in a layman's term, the path which the satellite or the rocket will take. So do you also consider the effects of these asteroids or meteors or whatever is out there in the space, or the gravitational force from other uh, planets
Yes.
for that matter?
Yeah. Correcting, I was not part of the Mangalyaan mission,
No, no,
but
Chandrayaan 1.
yeah, Chandrayaan one definitely. But in Chandrayaan one, the
Yeah.
asteroids and all don't play much role,
Okay.
because it's a kind of Earth Moon system where the almost a little like approximate means a comparatively very cleaner space with not much
Okay.
asteroids. I mean, it's like happen once in 1,000 years, some asteroid will go to it. Yeah. But otherwise, it's a very clean space. But whatever you said is absolutely true when you are going into this let's say Mangalyaan mission. So there are certain perturbations seen while the Mangalyaan mission was going on. It was going like almost exactly like the predicted into the or orbital models, etc. But there were deviations, slight deviations where the rockets need to be fired. So in that case, people are suspecting it's because your mathematical model is based on not static, but at least only considering a few celestial bodies like
Hmm.
the sun. In for a Mars mission, then you have a gravity of sun, and then you have the gravity of Mars, and then you have the Jupiter gravity there. So three components, but there are so many innumerable components which are like asteroidal components, asteroid related gravitational components, etc. And so many unknown parameters which are not part of the mathematical model. So typically these are asteroids. So their movements need not be the close. They do not come and close and hit the spacecraft, but there will
Hmm.
be minute, microscopic or nanoscopic variation on the orbital parameters because of their presence and their movement. This will cause a big problem in a kind of a longer missions. So that is the reason why there are
Okay.
corrections has to be made on the orbit. Longer the mission, the larger number of corrections. So Mars, compared to the planetary missions, of course, for ISRO it was the first mission, but as a humanity, we have gone up to Pluto exactly like this, and the kind of corrections required are much more larger than that. But for ISRO, it is a kind of a first time it is done. The scientists need to be appreciated for doing it correct for the first time. It's a miracle, basically.
So one thing that was shown in the movie as well in Mission Mangal, that a solar flare came in, which I think the scientists have not predicted before, and
Correct.
at the end
Yeah.
it helped to propel the, I mean, the time lag that was there uh, from the launch and when the Mars actually they were to I mean take the orbit of the Mars. I think that solar flare helped to speed up that process, to fill in that gap of all these days. So what if a solar flare hits a satellite and destroys it? Is there also a threat to that?
Yeah, actually, any kind of parameters, even if it is beneficial, like solar flares, can actually energize your spacecrafts, like
Okay.
solar panels, etc., and it boost it. That's what among that Mangal mission, Mangalyaan, it is shown. But it's not always beneficial because
Hmm.
any unknown is actually you need to recalculate, and that recalculation is a kind of the pain area, basically.
Okay.
So even if it is a kind of a force that is pushing you towards Mars, we have problems subsequently happening of rectifying the orbit actually. So that is there still. And the Mission Mangal, that movie has shown certain dramatic scenes, etc.
Obviously.
Which are part of the movie, part of
Obviously.
the selling of the movie, etc. But
Yeah.
the real thing is, if the is actually the terror inside the mind of the people who are controlling the spacecraft, like that.
Right. So, so towards the end of this first part of the podcast, I would just like to know from you. So, our curiosity towards these things come from the sci-fi movies that we see day in day out, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and that just just satisfied our curious mind. But to become a scientist, you have to just go beyond that. So, what exactly was your motivation to join ISRO, and for that matter, become a scientist?
Yes. So the kind of since childhood, I was having fascinated by two things. One is the planets outside Earth. So as a child, around 5 to 6 years onwards, the moment I know about that there is such a thing called other planets like Earth, I was asking like no, a lot of things. Like I was bombarding my parents with questions about each planet and what is how it looks like, what is the color of sky in all those things, in those planets, etc. So that is the kind of a interest area. Second
Hmm.
one is the Mahabharata and all, about, it ended up in writing books on
Right.
Mahabharata, Ramayana, and Rigveda, etc. So these two interests was there right from the childhood. And when it comes to a job, the interest in Mahabharata, definitely it is there, but it is not like currently, at least for today, it's not resulting to any kind of profession or job.
Hmm.
So then the second interest, again, it becomes dominant, and then I decided I will be going to the ISRO as I want to leave work like a scientist, etc. That was my idea. And but see, to be frank, I was not doing anything actively in that direction. I
Okay.
was like just like anybody after my engineering. I was also interested in software, and I was doing software development when there was no software industry in India.
Hmm.
At least not like whatever you're seeing. So currently, that time I was taking an electronics and communication engineering as my engineering degree, and that was why I was pursuing the BTech in electronics. And that time I was fascinated by the computer programming, etc. Even though it was not my subject, I was in the computer lab with the CSE computer science students, and I became a favorite of the lab in charge. He is a CSE computer science lecturer, and he saw me every day. I am coming from the electronics and communication branch and coming and sitting there, and I was doing a lot of programming there, like solar system and spacecraft coming from Earth, going into Moon, Mars, etc. Pure using pure mathematics. There was no unit, no game engines, etc. like that in that period.
Hmm.
Using C language and the C graphics, etc. So that was unusual, etc. So that way, I was very much progressing in the computer science, in this computer programming, and that was in 1996, I remember. So in 1996, there was no computer, IT industry, etc. But I was continuing that. And then after 1999, I done the BTech. I was taken into a gaming company where I was
Okay.
doing game engines, and I was working as a game engineer there. And suddenly, like after around 1 year, there was a kind of an interview call from ISRO, from this Sriharikota, for engineers. And I just because of my earlier curiosity, I just get into the interview without any preparation. So the people who are interviewing, it was a panel of scientists who are some 10, 9 people, very senior to me, were sitting there, and they were laughing that he is coming without any kind of preparation. There was not a file also in my hand, because people will come with certificates and other things. I was not having anything, so I coming with, he is fully confident and coming without anything to show. And then they started interview, and that time they understood that I am from a game engine gaming background with the game engine creation. So that is what they wanted at that time. They wanted a person who was having that expertise, who can
Okay.
create this orbital dynamic, this orbital for the Chandrayaan orbital design, etc. They who are capable of game engines and etc. That is how I selected, because of my job as a game engineer, game engine developer. That is the reason I was selected into the ISRO. And that was this game. This using that, I created this lunar Chandrayaan, the study phase, the orbital dynamics related software I created on basis of the game engine, etc. So that's how I came into ISRO. And then a lot of things, was a lot of positive things happened. Like the it was fortunately, I was the APJ was visiting in the our facility that was in VSSC at that time in Trivandrum. I was fortunate to show the project to him, and he was appreciating it very much. A lot of positive things happened.
My next
So
question
I
was that only. How
Yeah.
was that? How was that meeting? I mean, with the man himself, the legend APJ Abdul Kalam. How is he as a how was he as a person? And what did you learn with the brief meeting that you had with him?
Yes, he was a very down to earth kind of person. And see, for example, I was little bit no, very much frightened and hesitant to come and speak to him, because I don't know how he'll respond, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And he was at one more thing. He was actually 9 days into becoming the president of India.
Yes,
He
yes.
was declared as a president elect, and within 9 days he will become the president of India. So that time everybody was, even people in ISRO who were earlier his colleagues, they were also very much frightened to meet him. But I was because I was very much fascinated with the project I had done. I want to show it to him. I just like that I came and asked him, "Can I speak for a few minutes?" And then I went there and then explained the project to him. And he was very much, he was just like an ordinary person. He was very much appreciated and spoke a lot of things, a lot of good things. Just 5 minutes, I was able to speak to him, and that means it transformed the entire life basically. Because one thing is the simplicity of the person that I
Yeah.
came to know. In subsequently, I came to know a lot more about APJ, how he is interacting with the students, how he is interacting with people, everything. So I know that he's a very much reachable, approachable, down to earth person, and there is no kind of no like he will speak to anybody. Like there was no kind of thought in his mind that he's a kind of scientist and president
Mm.
elect or anything. Not no kind of pretensions of any kind of anything like that. He's very much approachable person, very much down to earth, and highly appreciative of the colleagues, etc. And after my after my interaction with APJ, I read his book,
Okay.
and then in that he mentioned about in that book he is mentioning about his life history, etc. And then I understand, okay, I can correlate that with my experience with APJ, because totally kind of down to earth, and he's inspiring.
Yes.
Even in 1 second, he can inspire you. So that is the kind of speech he does. And he always, another point which I have taken into my career, even my 23 years, 24 years of career in ISRO as well as in various industries. One thing he has told I have taken as a part of my own management styles. So he gives a credit to the juniors. So whenever success happens, that credit goes to the juniors. Whenever there is a failure, he takes it to himself. The same principle I have used across all the organizations I have worked.
I think there is so much to learn from a person like him.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Jijith sir, thank you so much. With this, we come to this end of the first part of the podcast, wherein
yeah,
we spoke a lot about Chandrayaan 3, the Chandrayaan mission, the Mars mission. Thank you. And we look forward to our next part of the discussion.
sure.